it's real tough. But I think growing up at an early age, I never wanted to have to worry about money. I was we never poor, but we were kind of like lower class to middle class growing up. And I just, I have two brothers and two sisters. So I heard a lot growing up that, no, we can't afford that. No, we can't afford that. And, seeing my parents be stressed a little bit with money and I just knew that, I don't ever want to have to worry about money. If I see a t-shirt that I want, I just want to be able to buy it because I like it and not have to check the price tag. Want to not to have to worry about money. For every dollar I spend, I want to have $2 coming in.
You're listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast, where you'll hear the stories and interviews of everyday millionaires. We'll unveil their decisions, their strategies, and their current portfolio allocation. Now to your hosts, Clark Sheffield and Jace Mattinson.
Alrighty, welcome back, everybody. Another episode of the Millionaires Unveiled podcast. This is episode 195, where we tell the stories and strategies of everyday millionaires. This is Clark here with my co-host, Jace. Jace, what's going on, man? How are you?
Doing great, man. How you doing?
Doing pretty well. My wife's out of town for a few days here, so I got a couple days before I head back for a wedding. Out of town for a wedding, so maybe I'll play some golf tomorrow. Are you playing a lot?
I was playing a little bit, but it's funny you mentioned your wife's out of town. My wife's out of town too right now, so I've got the kiddos by myself.
We're on opposite sides of the country.
Yeah, no kidding. But no, I was playing golf quite frequently. I feel like my dad came in town. I played a couple times then, but I haven't played in the last week. Just been trying to catch up and stuff. But hopefully here we've had some unseasonable rain, which has caused a lot of issues, even though I've still gone out and played. But yeah, it's kind of weird for us to have this much rain
across the country. Yeah, I played for the first time, last week, first time of the year, and it was no bueno, but that's pretty on par for me. No pun intended. I'm no good, but it's fun to get out.
Oh, yeah, right. You probably had, 5 birdies or something?
Yeah, maybe one par. So big news in the personal finance space, I feel like, over the last couple weeks was when it became known that Peter Thiel had, how much, $5 billion in his Roth IRA?
Yeah, something to that effect. And just for some context, I guess, for our listeners, I think Peter Thiel was probably one of the early adopters of a Roth IRA, first of all. And second of all, definitely one of the early adopters of self-directed. He made some of those in early investments or early ownership stake and stock in PayPal in there, and then just continued to just roll that into all sorts of VC investments. So, yeah, I mean, he's rolled that for, all these years, call it 15, 20 years, maybe a little more, and gotten some significant returns, obviously invested in some companies that have done extremely well, and it's blown to $5 billion, excuse me.
Yeah, pretty crazy. I'm just looking at this article on MarketWatch. It says, ProPublica's report used tax documents to reveal the tech giant's account grew from less than $2,000 in 1999. Roths were started in 97, just so everybody knows, to $5 billion today, thanks in part to investment in privatized securities. That has Massachusetts Democratic Representative Richard Neal pretty upset, it sounds like. He says the total amount of money that can be saved in tax-preferred retirement accounts we need to limit. So we must shut down these practices, he says. So anyway.
I mean, on one thing, obviously people are going to be outraged. I mean, I think it came about when Mitt Romney had, a couple $100 million or whatever in his when he was running for president. People became outraged. But I think there's a few good takeaways and lessons to be learned. So Roths come out in 97. Peter Thiel adopts this in 99, right? So one, early adoption. Call it a risk, maybe not, I don't know. But he also took some risk with some of these companies. And it's a strategy the government put in place. And obviously most people are not going to have tax-free growth like that because they're not VC investors and they didn't start a company like PayPal. But I think there's some good takeaways for the average Joe. One, early adoption of something. And now that obviously Roth IRAs are much more mainstream, it's much more receptive. But I mean, heck, the guy did that when it was 2 years old. Like, I bet you most people weren't even investing in their Roths in the market then anyway.
Right.
Those things didn't really become commonplace probably till at 2006, 2007, 2008, I don't know. And then after that, Same thing with a Roth 401k. I mean, most companies, and even probably a lot of companies now, don't even have those options. It's becoming more normal, but it's taken a while for those to be adopted. And then two, taking the risk to self-direct some of that, and maybe bet on yourself in a business or invest in something, real estate or whatever it might be that might get you an outsized return like he did.
Yeah, it sounds like, I think I read somewhere, I could be wrong, but this is just going off memory here, that he wanted to invest the $2,000 in a traditional IRA. And I believe his financial advisor or some advisor told him, hey, no, you should put this in a Roth. It'll grow tax-free. And I believe that was initial shares of PayPal, right?
Yep, exactly.
So that's how that happened.
Home runs,
or at least part of it.
Yeah, more power to him. I mean, there's two ways to look at that, but I think take away the lessons learned and apply them in your own life, if you're not already.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, just for a quick recap here, last week we had Greg, net worth of 1.9, fully paid for house, or about, I think, paid for $350,000. And he was big on finding freedom and flexibility. And as soon as you can find that, that's what happiness is. And finding that flexibility is what stood out to him. And he wished he would have found that sooner. So interesting interview with him. This week we have Logan. He's a nurse anesthetist and a real estate investor. He has a net worth of $3.75 million, primarily in real estate. He's built most of his wealth really over the last 5 to 6 years. So an amazing journey to where he is today, and obviously tremendously successful. So that's today's interview with Logan. Thanks for tuning into the show week after week. I just want to read a review that we got on iTunes from Spreadsheet Dominator. Jace, how about that? Spreadsheet Dominator. He says, this podcast has been a great replacement of listening to chatty coworkers while I've been working remote since March 2020. Great diverse set of millionaires that have been interviewed. Thanks for all you do, from a fellow finance nerd. So thanks for that, Spreadsheet Dominator. If you enjoy the show, we appreciate you leaving reviews on iTunes, Stitcher, whatever platform you listen to. It helps us grow the show and reach new millionaire interviewees. So thanks for joining us again for episode 195. And without any further delay, let's get into the show with Logan.
Logan, you want to just give us a little bit about your background and what you're up to now?
Yeah. Hey, how's it going? So right now I am predominantly buying single family houses, usually kind of off market, distressed, where we're fixing them up, kind of doing the Burr model for those. And then still working a couple days a week in anesthesia as well.
Awesome. And what is your net worth today?
It's about 3.75 right now.
Awesome. And that is broken up how?
It's like predominantly in real estate and in cash. So I think when I did my numbers here, I have about 90,000 in cash value life insurance, about 10,000 in a self-directed 401k. And then I'm currently on about $200,000 in cash. And then the remaining is in equity and properties. And some of those properties, we're still in the process of like finishing their remodel. So we own them outright without a mortgage. So once we go ahead and refinance and put some debt in place, that'll probably free up another $600,000 in cash.
Wow, that's pretty remarkable. And I want to get into your real estate. Obviously, that's a big chunk of your portfolio and get into the details there. But let's just rewind here a little bit and go back to the beginning of your journey. So you said you work a couple of days a week in anesthesia. How did your career evolve into where you are now, working 2 days a week? Maybe go back to maybe your high school, college days.
Yeah. So, in high school, my passion was football, and that's all I wanted to do. I was a C student in high school, didn't really ever study. And then I ended up tearing my ACL, played a little bit of college football, tore my ACL again, just couldn't stay healthy. So the second time I tore it, I said, I've always been interested in the human body, so why don't I go study medicine? So when I was doing a pre-med, I actually ended up switching degrees, and I shadowed a plastic surgeon. He kind of turned me on to the field of nurse anesthesia. So I looked into it, and I switched careers from pre-med to do nurse anesthesia. And the whole time, I was serving tables and making a little bit of money when I was in college. And I just kept thinking, oh man, like once I'm an RN and I'm making, $70,000 a year, then I'm going to be, having more money coming in than coming out. Right. And then of course you graduate, you work as a nurse, and you're still paycheck to paycheck, right? It takes, months to pay off, a $5,000 credit card debt. And so then the whole time I was thinking, well, once I'm a nurse anesthetist and I'm making over $200,000 a year, that's when I'm going to, be living the good life and having more money come in that's going out and not knowing what to do with this extra cash. And then of course, that happens and you're still like, dang, it still takes, quite a little bit of time, even when you're a high income earner, to save a substantial amount of cash. And so kind of along the way, I started studying real estate probably right when I just graduated working as an RN, which is in 2009. And I was, listening to, I was on the Bigger Pockets podcast, reading different books. And I kind of just got indoctrinated into thinking that real estate would be my key to becoming financially free and at the end of the day, quote unquote, wealthy.
So did you start into real estate back in 2009 then?
Yeah. So, I always had the dream to go and do nurse anesthesia because I wanted that security of a high income. And so I was willing to work my butt off to get, straight A's. So I was a straight A student in college. Once I tried, I just kind of put the same work ethic towards that. So I was willing to work my butt off to, achieve that high income and pay the sacrifices for that so that I had a good fallback plan. So if investing didn't work, I always knew I had this baseline income from a high paying job. But I did not invest during that time. I was really tempted in like 2012, 2013 because I had some income. I was living in Las Vegas. I saw the market prices had dropped like 60%. But I knew that I was going to be going to graduate school for anesthesia, and I really didn't want to take on the liability of having a rental and having zero income and being, working 60, 70 hours a week in school. So I held off until I graduated and I started working as a CRNA, which was in August of 2015.
So 2015, you make your first real estate investment. Was that in a single family house?
So in 2015, I graduated and really I had like $15,000 in credit card debts because, your student loans run out and you're kind of living off of whatever. And so I just worked and saved. And in 2016 is when I made my first purchase. So I started kind of doing what everything I read about. Like I consumed a ton of information, but I didn't have a ton of clarity on what I should actually be doing based on my goals. So I was kind of doing everything. I was doing bandit signs, yellow letters. And I mean, here I was making $250,000 a year and I'm taking phone calls from, people and putting out bandit signs at 4 a.m. before I go to the hospital and do anesthesia. And, probably around June of 2016, I actually got my first, good lead in the house we ended up closing on. And it came from a Facebook ad. So I met with the sellers. They wanted to relocate, ended up purchasing the property for around $41,000, which is, at the time, I mean, I was like, even though I was making good income, I was still kind of scared because it was a big purchase. I'd never done it before. And I was kind of thinking of any excuse I could to kind of get out of the transaction. But the seller was really counting on me to come through. So I felt this obligation because I told them that, yeah, we could buy your house. And tried to wholesale it and no one wanted it. And so I said, you know what, I'm just going to go through with this. Like the numbers all make sense. And so I partnered with one of my friends on that very first deal. And we bought it, we fixed it up, and instead of renting it out, we gave it to a private management company. They took forever, and I'm like, you know what, I can do a better job. So I went and I actually used like an owner finance strategy on this first house to where we bought it for 41. The rehab was about 12,000, so we're in it for about 53, and then we turned around and we sold it for $99,000 on a 10-year note at 10% interest, and we took $2,000 down, which is a little bit too light for a down payment. But what happened with that is that all of a sudden I started receiving $1,254 in income. And I was doing the math. I was thinking, well, hold on, I only put $53,000 into this, and obviously I had a partner, but we only put $53,000 into this, and it's spinning off $1,254 a month. And at the time I had about $110,000 in student loans, and I was paying about $900 a month. And that was on a 10-year loan as well. So in my mind, I thought, wow, I kind of just traded this $54,000 in to pay off my $100,000+ student loan debt because it was covering the payment plus a few extra $100 in cash flow.
Okay, lots to go here. And so just real quick, we'll just keep going with this property. But let me back up just for a second. So you bought it in 2016, you said, right? Your first property?
Yes.
And what was your net worth at that point?
Oh, I mean, if you take like student loan debts, I was negative, because I had $110,000 115,000 in student loans. But I saved up about $26,000 in cash. And that was just through working and, living frugally, to the point, I'd saved most of my income. But I was able to pay off all the credit card debt that I accumulated at the end of school and just save the money from every paycheck. And so I guess, in cash, I had about 26,000. I didn't really have any major debts at the time.
Okay, interesting. So you've made this all in the last, what is it now? We're mid-2020 recording this mid-October 2020. So you've made all this in the last 4 years.
Yeah,
exactly.
Years,
right? 4.5, give or take.
Yeah, probably about 4 years. And I guess I bought it July of 2016. So 4 years and a few months.
Wow. And just for our listeners, Logan's taking this call from a hotel. So in case there's some background music, right? I hear some R&B or something behind you. So
that's not my foot.
That's what this is. Okay, so let's keep rolling with this deal. So you talked about all these different methods that to find the properties. How did you find this first one?
So this first one came from a Facebook ad. I was just kind of the be all do all person in the business. And I don't recommend doing it this way, but it was from a Facebook ad.
Okay, and then you reached out and you said you did owner financing and it cash flowed from there. So let me just ask you big picture on the real estate portfolio. How many different properties, and are they all you said single family, right? For a lot of them, fix and flips and the BRRRR method, but are they all single family or is there different stuff mixed in there?
Yeah, so I have one 16 unit, which is really 8 duplexes side by side, right on the same road. And then the rest are all single family houses. And so currently I have 55 units, and I think I've purchased 60 units since 2016 till now. So I've sold 5 of them outright where we flipped it and sold it. I carry back financing to where I act as the bank and I do owner financing on 4 of the properties. And then the rest are all rentals. Wow.
So I shouldn't have even asked it, right? Because as soon as we hit 4 million or 3.75 you're at, right, in 4.5 years, I mean, the obvious question is you're increasing your net worth if you average it out by $1 million a year. So how did this all happen so quickly?
Well, I really think it's a snowball effect. It felt really slow starting off. So to do a little quick, I guess, overview, in 2016, we bought that property. I bought a primary residence with 5% down. So I did an 80% first loan and then a 15% second loan to avoid the PMI. And I put 5% down on 2 nights of a house probably, but it was like $350,000. But I knew that the price had dropped probably about 20% from the peak. And this was in just a local market. And then I bought one more fixed a renovation property, big project where we had to fix it at the end of 2016. 2017, I bought 2 properties. 2018, I bought 8. And then 2019, I bought 23. And then I bought 24 so far this year in 2020. And the way that it's really occurred was I started using private lenders where I would give them a promissory note and a first lien position. And I mean, my first private lender, I gave him even a 15% return on one property. So he got a 15% return with good collateral position for 6 months. But the great thing is that when you're borrowing money and you're paying people back on time and you're doing what you're saying you're doing, and you're finding off-market properties where you can add value to them, I'm able to get all my money back out of it on the refinance and pay my private lenders, and then I'm able to use that money again. So really it felt like a lot of work at first when I was doing 1 house and 2 houses, and it'd take me 5 months to do a rehab because I'm stumbling and trying to figure out how to deal with contractors. And then as I start to kind of figure that side out, when you can refinance all your money out, plus all the money I'm making at my day job where I'm still working full time as a nurse anesthetist, I'm putting back into real estate, and then I'm living somewhat frugally as well. Things just start to exponentially grow, I guess, because, one of them was a 16 unit purchase, but if you take that away, the other remaining properties, I mean, I have probably negative money into the deal, meaning I've gotten more money back on the refinances that I've put down in the properties.
Wow. So you're probably working like a maniac the last few years here. Is that right? I mean, seriously, you're buying, you said 20 doors, right? Or 20 properties.
So kind of the business plan that I've implemented is I have people that will bring me off market deals. I'll quickly analyze them. If I have a question about the ARV or what it rent for, then I'll ask the specialist, which would be my property manager or broker or realtor. And then I'll have general contractors go out there and give me a bid for the renovation, and I'll back my way into the numbers on what I'll offer. And when you build like the team in place, a lot of this stuff is happening. It takes some work up front, but then during the renovation process, the general contractor is handling everything. So I can do 5, 6, 7 houses at a time of renovations as far as from a time management, because the general contractors are handling all the subs and making sure everything's done on time. And then I'm just verifying work with pictures and videos. And if I have questions, then I'll have property manager or realtor in town go look at these properties. Because I guess I never mentioned this too, that all these properties I'm buying from a distance, except for the first 3, excuse me, every other property I bought from over 1,000 miles away.
Wow. So how are you, lots of questions here. How are you finding them then?
So I started off by using resources like meetup.com and going to like the REI groups and networking with the people on there and just saying that, hey, I'm a cash buyer. And there tends to be more wholesalers than actual real cash buyers. And probably the best thing I did, it's really just relationships. So, you talk to a general contractor here, you talk to the people at the Pro Desk at Home Depot and Lowe's, you get on Facebook on these different buy-sell sites where they post things and you say, hey, I'm a cash buyer. And then, a newer wholesaler who I developed kind of a relationship with where he had a property. We kind of just had a good connection. I ended up buying probably like 12 to 15 properties from this one individual. And some of the deals were great deals because a traditional wholesaler might list it to their whole buyers list, or they might put it on a Facebook page. And so you might see hundreds of eyes on there. Where with this individual, he would bring the deal just to me. He'd say, hey, I got this seller and here's the property and this is kind of what they're wanting. And I would kind of help him negotiate with the homeowner, the seller. And we'd kind of negotiate together, and then we'd work out an assignment fee for him. So when he was getting a good assignment fee and making good money, I was getting exclusive deals that no one else saw. So it sometimes allowed me to get some really screaming good deals.
But even so, if you're 1,000 miles away, right, you get a great deal. You're 1,000 miles away, you're doing a big renovation or a lot of CapEx, right, on a property. How are you comfortable? You've obviously been comfortable. It's been successful, right? But how did you get comfortable, I guess, rather, at the beginning in handling these projects and not being able to go check in on them?
Yeah. So at first, I made mistakes, and, my third property, which the second one doesn't really count because it was we moved in there and we owner occupied it, and then we moved shortly after and rented it. So there's no renovation there. But the third one, we ended up using the same contractors that I used for the first person. But I was no longer in town. And, of course, I didn't vet the contractors well. And I thought they did a good job on the first one. They should do a good job on the third one. And, they ended up stealing like $4,500 from me, where I, paid them too much ahead of time. Like, everyone says you're not supposed to do. And, but, they give you a sob story. You feel bad. You're like, yeah, they're trustworthy. They'll get the work done. And then, of course, they don't. And they disappear and their phone gets disconnected. And so, dealing with that, you get frustrated, but you realize like, okay, you got to look at the bigger picture, and, you have to take that lesson and learn from it and move on. And the biggest thing that obviously, if you can get away with it, is you pay people after the work's been completed. And so what I did is I shifted over to find more professional general contractors who actually could manage a budget a little bit better, to where they weren't needing money from you to really pay their guys on the last job they did, where they had enough account where they could get the job going and they could complete, 10, 12, 15% of the job and show pictures verifying their work before I paid them one penny. So that I felt very comfortable knowing that, hey, yeah, they're showing me pictures. Yeah, they've done the demolition. Yeah, they've done the drywall. So I'm happy to send them the money, as soon as they show me the pictures that the work has been done.
So you really haven't seen a majority of these homes, have you?
Yeah. So I have probably seen like 10 of these houses. And, when I bought like the last, I guess, 47 or so, I just went to the area like 2 weeks ago, and it was like my first time there in 2 years.
Wow.
And, so it was, I had like 8 properties on my list to drive down and check. So it was a busy trip, but yeah, so I haven't seen a lot of them. And to me, the great thing about that is that it takes the emotional aspect out of it, because when I was moving from San Diego to Tyler, I ended up driving through this city in Texas where I invest. And And I stopped at a property I had under contract, and my general contractor said, well, we can get it done for, say, like 45,000 or whatever the price was. And I remember seeing it and thinking, man, this property cannot be remodeled for 45,000. And I wanted to back out of the contract. And this is after I've already done, 15, 16 deals, and most of these being from a distance. But because like when I'm there in person and you're seeing it, it's sometimes hard to envision what it can be versus what it currently is. And this is, as not a super experienced person at the time, but I've done 15, 16 deals. And even then I was like, I don't think so. Like, this isn't for me. But when you're from a distance, it's just numbers on a paper. So does it number out? Yes or no? And for me, I want to be all in with the purchase and renovation at like 70 to 80% max. So when I can go ahead and do a refinance, which are usually around 80% of the loan to value with commercial lenders, sometimes they're a little bit less. But if I'm all in at 70, 75%, well, I know I'm going to get all my cash back. So that kind of checks the first box. And then the second box is we do a rent analysis. And I say, well, okay, based on this loan and these terms and the property management fees and what I know the, PITI is, and a little bit allocated for maintenance, will I cash flow? And for me, I want to cash flow at least $200. And so if it hits both those criteria, and of course it's not in a really bad area because we don't want to be in D-class areas, to me, it's kind of like a no-brainer.
So how do you find contractors in new areas?
So right now I'm currently just investing in 2 areas, and finding the contractors and dealing with contractors is definitely the hardest part, because if I could just say, hey, I'm going to pay you this price and you're going to do it like you say you're going to, like, man, it would be so much easier. But that's definitely where the struggle is. And so networking is the best place. Again, most investors don't want to give up their great contractors, right? Because they want to keep them for their own jobs. So going to the pro desks, calling them up, talking to them, asking if they have any recommendations. I got recommendations from my commercial lender because they have clients who are general contractors. And so they know, well, these people have their finances ordered. They keep clean books. They seem organized. And that's kind of, and then just kind of word of mouth. And sometimes you just have to try people out, and maybe you try them out on smaller jobs before you give them a full renovation. You try them out on smaller things like, hey, okay, I'm going to have you just install flooring, or I'm just going to have you just do paint, and just kind of see how they do.
Well, that's pretty remarkable to build that network and to do this many fix and flips. So I want to go back. Just, you mentioned briefly that you have $90,000 in a cash value policy. Is that correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And how come you have that? Just maybe for our listeners, give a little insight into what that is and why you have that. I don't know that that's been brought up on our show before.
So, like it's an infinite banking concept. And I spent a lot of time, reading about whole life and high cash value whole life. And is it worth it? Is it a scam? And it takes so long to get your money back. And, the thing is, some real high net worth individuals who I know utilize it, and kind of seeing the numbers on paper kind of convinced me that, this is probably the way to go. I do admit that it is a confusing product as far as there's a lot of variables that go into it. So, the whole saying, if it's too confusing, then it's probably the benefit to the person selling you, not to you. But I look at it kind of like a jack of all trade. So, I need to have, when you have a lot of rental properties, you need to keep some cash reserves, because that's what's going to get you through the rocky times like we've had with COVID. So, to me, this is a good place to store cash as opposed to a checking account, which gives you like no return. With this one, I get a contractual like 4.5% return, which ends up being like this last year, I think I got like 6.1% was my return on my cash value that's in the policy. So it allows a storing place for my money that gives me a return that's better than checking account. It protects you from all, I guess, from being like sued and lawsuits and things like that. Like, it's creditor protected. Depends on the state, but in Texas, it's unlimited, I believe. And it also allows me to borrow the money against the cash value. So I'm not actually taking it out, but I can get a loan, and it takes about 3 to 7 business days, and I can get a loan against the value of the cash value. So like I said about being liquid, if I need that money, I can get it in 3 to 7 business days. And then for like the basic concept behind there is that your money is earning you're making money in 2 places. One is you're getting that like 5, maybe 6% return on your money. And then you're taking that money and you're investing it at an even higher return, hopefully 15 to 20%, that you're then using to pay back the loan. And the thing is, there is an interest rate when you take a loan out, which is about 5%. And so some people might say, well, okay, you're getting 5% return, but you're also paying 5% on the loan, so you're breaking even. And the first year that's correct, but if you were to borrow, say, $50,000 and you got a 5% return and you're paying a 5% loan, well, after the first year, you paid the same that you earned. But after the second year, your interest capitalizes and you're getting a 5% return on a higher amount, but you're still paying a 5% on that same $50,000. So you're earning compound interest, but you're only paying simple interest. So you do make a little bit more money that way than if you just had it in a checking account. It does take about 5 years for the cash you put in to equal your cash value to equal what you put in. But the plan is at 7 years, the policy will pay for itself. So you no longer have to fund it anymore. And I have 3 little kids. So it also offers protection, of course, of like a death benefit. And so for me, I put about $75,000 a year into this, and it gives me a little over $2 million in permanent death benefit. And so I'll pay for 7 years. After those 7 years, I'll never have to put any more money in. But that cash value, which will be maybe $600,000 at the time, will continue to earn a 5 to 5.5% return for me indefinitely. But it still allows me the ability to use it while I'm alive, because I can then pull that money out, which is a loan, so it's tax free. And say even if I'm paying 5%, I can lend that money at 10% and just make that spread. So it just gives me a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting concept. It's definitely something that hasn't been brought up on our show until now. So I appreciate you getting into the details there and explaining that a little bit. So on your rentals and going forward, what is kind of the strategy and the game plan? Is there a certain number of doors you want to get to, or passive income, from some of these fix and flips that you might hold?
I really got to spend some more time and like really focus and get clear on what I really want to do. Right now, I'm still just kind of in that growth mode and that go mode. But ultimately, I don't think necessarily having 100 doors or 200 doors is going to make me happier. So I need to kind of figure out what do I want out of life, and where's that balance point. Right now, I see people like, David Osborne, he's got a 100 million net worth and he's got 100 doors. And so it kind of benchmarks that I'm just arbitrarily going after. But I know in the back of my mind that, well, it doesn't really matter. So I keep asking myself that question. Should I sell some of the properties, like the worst performing dogs, and pay off the good ones and just sit back on cash flow and kind of just enjoy it? Should I keep growing? Should I move to self-storage? Should I move to multifamily? Cause the 116 unit deal I did is performing better than anything else. And we're doing I say we a lot, but it's really, my company. And then I have people that kind of work in the business for me. And, so I'm doing like a value add where, it's just a simple, we're kind of doing a cosmetic, we're fixing it up, and then we're able to bump up rents. And because of that, things are valued on a cap rate. So you have your income minus your expenses gives you your NOI. And so when you can bump up your income, you bump up your NOI and you divide that by whatever the going cap rate is. That's how you get your value. So if it's like a 10 cap, every dollar you increase in NOI, you're increasing the value by about $10. And so for me, I've been able to add like maybe $300,000 to $400,000 in value in the 16 unit multifamily, in, the last 6 months, simply by just doing, new floors, new paints, new countertops. I see the power of multifamily. I just don't know if that's the game I really want to get into with how competitive it is. And it seems like on the larger deals, you need to really build a big team and dive in those syndications. And I just don't know if that's what I want to play or that's what interests me.
Right. It's an interesting conversation, right? And it's an interesting thing to think through. We just interviewed a guy earlier this evening that talked about that, like the trade-off, right? Between, I guess his was really Jay's time and money, right?
Yeah, totally.
How much he wants to put into his career. But in the same sense, that's what it is here, right? Do you want to sit back and collect cash flow, or do you want to go all forward? And anyway, just an interesting concept. So Logan, walk us through just real quick one of these homes from start to close. Maybe you find it through a relationship, right, with one of these wholesalers you mentioned. what price are you buying at? How much are you putting into it? How long does it take to do the job? And then how do you sell and for how much?
Yeah. So, every deal is obviously slightly different. I'll give you just a couple quick examples. So, I was presented with an opportunity from a wholesaler and negotiate with the wholesaler, and we end up coming on a purchase price of $125,000. So the property, I knew the area. I already have 5 houses in the same subdivision, so I'm very familiar with what the ARV price would be on it. The house was livable and it looked like it was in pretty good condition. So I had one general contractor go out there and give me a bid. And I ended up actually using some handyman and kind of just subbing it out myself because it was more just minor work. So on this property, it was a very light rehab. We put in like $10,000, which was pretty much paint, some flooring, some bathroom upgrades, nothing, just cosmetic, and maybe a little HVAC fixing that. And so then call my property manager up and say, hey, the property at, this street is ready to rent. So they'll go and they'll evaluate and make sure it's ready to list it. That one ended up, the market's a little bit down right now. So that one ended up renting for $1,600. And then I'll go to my commercial lender and I'll say, hey, I have this property, which we've owned free and clear. I'm ready to get a loan on it. So they'll review just my own personal financials as well as a business. But essentially they'll order a BPO. The BPO came back at $217,000. And so she says, well, we can do a loan at 80% of its value, which I think was like 172. I've had a lot of money out with this lender now. So I know that they are kind of, looking to decrease their LTV. So we end up doing a loan at 75%, which is $162,000. So on this property, I had purchased it, I think in like June, and I purchased it for $125. I rehabbed it for about a month, and then we got a tenant in probably about 3 weeks later. And then about a month after that, I was able to go ahead and refinance $162,000 out, which I was only in it for $134,000. That would end up being like a great deal to where I got $30,000 back more than I put into it. And that's kind of the ability to where, I can have like I said, like a negative dollar in some of these properties, or probably in the properties if you average it across all of them. So that was a property where it's obviously not a typical deal. It was a great burr, I guess, but the property just breaks even. And because I have a lot of cash flow in my portfolio right now, after all expenses, I'm right about $25,000 a month in cash flow. So I'm okay taking a property that might break even, but I get $30,000 in tax-free dollars that I can then reinvest, and it's at a 5% interest rate. So I know I can beat that, or I'm confident I can. I get more tax write-offs as far as interest, and because it's a larger loan, I have more principal being paid down per month on the loan. So even though I'm breaking even on that one, I'm still okay with it, because if I was to take out less and say I only took out $10,000 because I wanted to cash flow, $250 a month, I'm really just waiting for that cash flow to accumulate, as opposed to taking it today. And so I guess once your portfolio can mature enough that you can sustain a few break-even properties, it's worth taking that. Early on, I'm always advising people to go for the cash flow. But that was like, that's not a typical property. That was one where I was able to get a big chunk of cash back.
No, I was just going to say that's awesome. How did you get so much leverage on it? How did you get the bank to give you such a big loan if it just broke even?
So these properties are all purchased off market. So it's not like the bank can sit there and they don't see this property that's listed for $135,000 on the MLS. And then 2 months later, they have a broker would obviously see that it was listed for $125, and they're probably going to appraise the price for somewhere around there, where it was an off market. So it really comes down to be able to buy the property correctly, because you can't really do too much about the renovation. You can't do too much about the appraisal. So it really comes down to purchasing the property correctly. And when there's just people who need to sell for whatever reason, so there's either distress in the sellers or there's distress in the properties, a lot of these wholesalers will go out and they'll find these people, and they need to sell and they need to cash out for whatever reason that benefits them. And it just comes, I guess, with networking. And, I may have 6 or 7 different wholesalers who bring me deals. And so on this one, the numbers look good. I was expecting a higher renovation. I was able to get away with a little bit less. When we do a BPO on it, it's not a full blown appraisal. They're not going inside the house and looking at every crevice. And that being said, I typically do really nice renovations where we have the nicest rental properties in the market. But you can sometimes get away with, hey, we know it's going to be rental. We know it's going to get beat up a little bit. We don't need to put in the newest things right now. They're still good enough. So let's not rip out the cabinets and put brand new cabinets in when the cabinets are still decent cabinets. And I guess that on this one, we just were able to buy it, or I was just able to buy it at a good enough price, and that it appraised, probably a little bit higher than what it would actually sell for. But that's who the banks rely on. The banks rely on the brokers to give them the value of their collateral, and they're just making loans against that collateral. So the broker's a specialist in that area. And I may disagree with the price. I may have thought that it might have been worth around 190 or 200, but it appraised for 217.
So, Logan, let's just wrap up. I know we're coming short on time here. Let me just wrap up with a couple rapid fire questions. But first, looking back at your story, which has really happened in the last 4 years, right? Not to take anything away before that, because you obviously have had a successful career. But are there a couple things that you can point to and say, hey, that's what made me become so successful? That's what made me a millionaire? Was it your work determination? Was it the fear of not succeeding? Was it developing relationships you mentioned? What things could you point to that were really crucial to your success?
Yeah, it's real tough, but I think growing up at an early age, I never wanted to have to worry about money. I was never poor, but we were kind of like lower class to middle class growing up, and I just I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters, so I heard a lot growing up that no, we can't afford that, no, we can't afford that, and seeing my parents be stressed a little bit with money, and I just knew that I don't ever want to have to worry about money. If I see a T-shirt that I want, I just want to be able to buy it because I like it and not have to check the price tag. And so I'm kind of frugal by nature because of that, and that's probably something that'll be hard for me to, I think, overcome and learn to spend a little bit more, which I have. But I guess it's just that wanting not to have to worry about money. For every dollar I spend, I want to have $2 coming in.
So how much, let me ask you this, and we've asked this to several other millionaires, how much of your success is due to luck and how much of it is due to skill? I mean,
10% to luck, but I would have been successful regardless. It's just how successful would you be? Mitch Stevens says, you're not going to get hit by the money truck. You got to stand in the middle of the road to get hit by the money truck. And so that means you got to be in the game to get lucky every now and then, where maybe I get like a home run deal that, I didn't really do much to earn that last deal, that huge appraisal. Well, I didn't do a whole lot of value add that one. It was a pretty light remodel. So I did get lucky on a deal like that. But on the previous 40 deals I did, I kind of grinded it and I worked hard. And I think that I would be successful regardless of the market because I was just very methodical and planned in what I was going to do and how I was going to do it.
Yeah, sure. And you've obviously done a great job. So how old were you? Let me just finish up here. How old were you when you became a millionaire?
I think I hit my first million in net worth, I think in 2018. So that made me like 34.
And how much do you spend annually? Annual household spending?
We spend about 8,000 to 9,000 a month. So I guess about 110.
Oh, 100.
I think. Yeah. Well, maybe less.
Oh, you're right.
About 100.
Yeah, 100K. Okay. Clearly, I'm an accountant, right? What's been your range of household income through your working life? Does your wife work inside the home as well?
No, she's a stay-at-home mom, so we're blessed to have that. And the range, I actually jotted it down real quick. So I made 44,000 in 2015, 160,000 in 2016. I made 217,000, 234,000, and in 2019 I made 315,000. And then this year I'm projected to make about 200,000 because I've cut down to 2 days a week.
Wow, way to go! That's like what, 8x your income, 6x your income over time?
Yeah. I had a couple years with good earning, but due to the power of real estate and the way I had my tax set up, I was able to pretty much kind of keep all that money. And the real estate kind of helped me not pay a lot of taxes, as you're probably familiar with.
Yeah. And how many units do you own now?
I have 55 units.
55 total. Cool. So just in closing here, we've talked here for almost an hour, and we've covered a lot, I know, and you've shared some great nuggets of wisdom and advice. But looking back, is there a couple things that you would point to and say, hey, I wish I would have done that differently? Or are there things you looked at and say, I'm so glad I did that? So mistakes or advice here in wrapping up?
That's a tough one. I'm pretty happy, I guess, with the way things turned out. I know I could have done things a lot faster and a lot more efficient. And I still know that I could grow a lot faster if I'm just more focused and more clear on what I want to do. But you kind of get that shiny object syndrome and you kind of chase all these different ideas and these different strategies. And I think that what I would recommend is find a role model or find a mentor, someone who you want to be or be like, and just go all in on their strategy. If they resonate with you, because you can be successful in multiple different ways, but I think you have to choose one and you have to really go after it and become the best at that thing. And I would just tell everyone just to find that one thing for you and go 100% towards it.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on. Thanks so much for sharing your story. Great advice, everybody. Again, that's Logan, net worth of $3.75 million. So thanks again, Logan. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you guys.
Thanks for listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast with Clark Sheffield and Chase Mattinson. For more stories, investment opportunities, and information, check out our website at millionairesunveiled.com. See you next time when you'll hear from another everyday millionaire.